Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, an Army helicopter has crashed in the mountains in part of northern Pakistan, killing 7 people. We'll tell you who was killed in that crash. Also on tonight's program, a gunman opens fire in a Nigerian high school, killing 6 students. Saudi Arabia says that their coalition has warned rebels, but is also promising a ceasefire. And the EU says that Ukraine and Georgia, that there is progress towards visa-free access within the EU. I'm Jason Miller. You're on the Evan Miller Report for this Friday, May the 8th. Also on tonight's program, we break down the latest results of the UK 2015 elections as the Conservatives take all in the UK general elections. All those stories and more, plus Corey Evans.
Thank you, Jay. More revelations from the abyss as wreckage of a ferry is... Hung jury again? The Ethan Pat's murder trial drags on. Uber makes a bid for Nokia's mapping technology. That'd help drivers avoid getting lost on the way. He pays big to settle a pollution lawsuit. But let's leave it. It's a Walk of Fame star today. You'll find that out in the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source, starting now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Public Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Friday, May the 8th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller along with Corey Evan. I'd like to thank all who participated in last night's UK election coverage, especially last night, Kel Fritz from coming on live from our Canadian Bureau last night for an hour and a half special here on the SHR Media Network. Give us those last minute results coming in. It's funny, Corey, we're off air a half hour and those final results went down in the UK. It was awesome seeing history in the making right there last night.
Oh, man, and we already have a few resignations from the liberal side of things. Man, they are just throwing in the towel like nothing.
Oh, yeah. Well, we have the latest on those UK elections coming up later in the program. Plus, Orlean Koehle, SHR Media's global affairs correspondent, joins us to break this election down for us and tells us what this means for the United States as the UK goes conservative.
Oh, man, that's exciting. And I think it's got the stock markets blowing up, and you'll understand why. Business report later on.
Absolutely right. Everything has to do with something with those UK elections today, so we're going to give you the very latest. Anything with the UK elections, you're going to probably hear it on tonight's Evan Miller Report. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we start off tonight over in Pakistan, where an Army helicopter has crashed in a mountainous part of northern Pakistan, killing 7 people, including the Philippine and Norwegian ambassadors. It crashed during an emergency landing in the Gilgit-Baltistan territory. The wives of the Indonesian and Malaysian envoys, 2 pilots and a crew member, also died. They were to attend the opening of a tourism project. 2 senior Pakistani ministers said the crash was down due to a technical fault. Earlier, the Pakistani Taliban claimed that they were behind the attack. But Defense Minister Kashwa Ashraf and former Foreign Minister Eska Choudhury said there appeared to have been multiple technical problems with the helicopter. The area is not a stronghold of the Pakistani Taliban. The militant group earlier issued a statement saying that they had shot down the helicopter with an anti-aircraft missile intended to kill the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Military spokesman Ashim Bajwin said in a Twitter post that Norwegian envoy Leifjef Larsen and Domingo Luciano of the Philippines had been killed. He also said 5 others were injured, including the Polish and Dutch ambassadors. 11 foreigners and 6 Pakistanis were also on board the Mi-17 helicopter when it came down in the Noftur Valley, he added. Stay with the Evan Miller Report for the latest on this developing story. We'll bring you the very latest if it becomes available. And stay tuned to SHR Media tomorrow. Corey Evans will have the latest on this story on the SHR Weekend News, which starts at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, right here on SHR Media. Also available on podcast on Pundit Press Radio. A gunman opened fire on students after walking into a high school in Pakistonium in northeast Nigeria and critically injured 6 waitresses and a humanitarian worker said. Sure, it was not immediately possible to ascertain whether the gunman, accompanied by a second attacker, was from the Islamist Jihad group Boko Haram, but the attack was in their style. Boko Haram has been trying to carve out, as we've reported in the past few months, an Islamic State in the northeast of Africa's biggest economy for the past 6 years, but Nigerian troops, with the help of sister countries Chad, Niger, and Cameroon, are pressing an offensive against the militants. To Yemen now, where a coalition led by Saudi Arabia ordered civilians in rebel strongholds in northern Yemen to flee by nightfall Friday, warning it will strike anything in the region even as the Saudis pressed for a ceasefire to begin next week. After the evening deadline passed, the coalition's warplanes attacked a rebel-held complex in the region that was believed to contain weapons, according to the Saudi news agency. The declaration of the entire region of Yemen as a military target was a sharp escalation that raised alarm about more casualties in a conflict that has killed more than 1,400 people, many of them civilians, since March the 19th. The fighting will also create a humanitarian crisis in what was already the Arab world's most impoverished nation. According to Saudi Foreign Minister Adil al-Jubair, he announced in Paris that a ceasefire aimed at allowing humanitarian aid to reach Yemen's embattled population of 25 million would begin Tuesday, but on the condition that the Shiite rebels known as the Houthis and their allies also halt hostilities. The mixed signals from Saudi Arabia seem to have 2 purposes: the declaration of an all-out war in the northern region of Saudi, the Houthi stronghold, which appeared aimed to stopping cross-border attacks against Saudi cities that have inflicted civilian casualties. At the same time, it appeared to pressure the Houthis and their allies' military units loyal to the ousted president Al-Abdin Shaheen to abide by the ceasefire. Jewish home leader Naftali Bennett, a social media savvy former entrepreneur and vocal opponent of the Palestinian state, is now the new kingmaker of Israeli politics with a key role in the government. The 43-year-old metric Rise has turned his nationalist religious party into a political force able to demand several key portfolios in return for joining Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's incoming coalition party. The former Special Forces commando took Israeli politics by storm back in 2012 when he became head of the Jewish Home, which was failing with just 3 seats in the 120-member parliament. Bennett increased the hardline party's representation in the Knesset fourfold and became economy minister. He is set to become education minister in the newly formed government. A son of American immigrants, the former high-tech entrepreneur with near-perfect English sold his startup back in 2005 for $145 million, which is the equivalent in Europe of 110 million euros, and went into politics a year later, heading Netanyahu's staff when his Likud party was in opposition. As economy minister under Netanyahu, which began in 2013 to 2015, Bennett further honed the communicator skills that helped propel him into the government, using social networks to connect with voters in Hebrew, English, and French. His social media posts addressed people as brothers and sisters and using self-effacing humor. Addressing a right-wing rally before the March 17th elections, a guitar playing Bennett led thousands in song. For more on this story, we'll post this story up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. Interesting into the bit of the life of Naftali Bennett, the kingmaker in the ex-Israeli coalition government. All right, folks, moving over to Palestine now, where Human Rights Watch on Thursday has accused the Palestinian security forces of arresting or questioning West Bank students over their political opinions, saying several had been mistreated. It is deeply worrying that students are being held by Palestinian forces for no apparent reason other than their connection to Hamas or their opinions, said Sarah Lee Whitston, HRW's Middle East and North African director. Palestinians should be able to express critical political opinions without being arrested or being, she said in a statement. Citing prisoner rights groups, Admir HRW said 25 students have been arrested in the wake of the annual student council vote at the Birzeit University near Ramallah back on April the 22nd. The vote, which takes place at universities across the West Bank, pits Fatah-supporting students against those backing the rival Islamist Hamas movement, with the poll in Birzeit won by Hamas. In the West Bank, Fatah is the dominant political power, while Hamas's political power base is in the Gaza Strip. 3 days after the vote, the security forces then arrested Jihad Salim, a representative of the Hamas-affiliated group in Birzeit, and held him for about 24 hours, during which time he was being questioned about the elections. Over to farther up in the European Union today, they said that Ukraine and Georgia, both embroiled in conflict with the likes of Russia, have made progress in gaining visa-free access to Europe, a key payoff to boosting ties with the 28-nation bloc. Okay, thank you very much. Just got a message that one of our guests is free. Thank you very much. Ukraine and Georgia have signed association agreements to build a future with the European Union, but in doing so, they have sparked deep hostility and suspicion in their Soviet-era master Russia. The European Commission said a review of both countries showed distant progress in meeting the standards required to allow citizens from both countries to enter the European Union nations for short stays without needing a visa. The assessment found that despite the exceptional circumstances that Ukraine currently faces, the progress achieved has been noteworthy, according to the Commission in a statement. Meanwhile, Georgia's progress has also been significant in a short period of time, but still needs to address the remaining recommendations and sustain efforts by all stakeholders involved in what will be needed, the Commission added. And, of course, we'll be asking Orlean Koehle about this more at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, along with our special guest that we have been teasing on our Facebook page, Andrew Lowe, former Irish citizen who now lives here in the United States, will be giving us his take on the 2015 UK elections. All right, folks, I'll be back in a few minutes with the latest on those UK elections, post-election cycle. But first, send it over to Corey Evan. He has another international story that he's keeping an eye on today, plus the day's other news, plus the business news today. Corey, take it away, my friend.
I'll take it. Italian investigators say many bodies are on the wreck of a boat believed to be the craft that sank 3 weeks ago with more than 800 migrants on board. This from the Australian, believe it or not. Prosecutor Giovanni Salvi made the announcement in Catania, Sicily, a day after the Italian Navy said it had located a 25-meter vessel about 157 kilometers, roughly 100 miles, northeast of the Libyan coast and 375 meters below sea level. The Navy captured images of the vessel, believed to be the migrant boat that sank on April 18th, using a remotely operated camera. Only 28 people survived the shipwreck and 24 bodies were found floating at sea. Survivors reported that hundreds more were on board, locked in the hold of the vessel and unable to escape after it overturned. Salvi said footage indicated that at least one cabin door was open and explained that prosecutors were considering the possibility of ordering the recovery of the wreck from the seabed to verify whether the doors were really locked. The UN's refugee agency, the United Nations again, described the shipwreck as the deadliest incident in the Mediterranean ever recorded. Their words, not ours, ladies and gentlemen. Then again, what does the United Nudists know these days? Oh yeah, that's right. Nothing!
You got that right.
Yes. Moving on. Out of Madrid, according to the Times of India, police found an 8-year-old Ivorian boy hidden in a suitcase that was smuggled across the border into a Spanish territory in North Africa, an official said on Friday. A 19-year-old woman chased through a pedestrian crossing from Morocco into the small Spanish-governed territory of Ceuta on Thursday. I think that's how he pronounced it. That's according to a spokesman for the Civil Guard police force. Quote, when they put the suitcase through the scanner, the operator noticed something strange, which seemed to be a person inside the case, he said. When it was opened, they found a minor in a terrible state. And from Ivory Coast, according to the spokesman. The Civil Guard arrested the woman. They also arrested the boy's father when he tried to cross the border a few hours later. Social media lit up Thursday when Omar Kadir was freed on bail by an Alberta court. This one out of Canada, according to the CBC news agency. People are parsing his every word, commenting, offering support, and making threats against him. Comments pages filled up on news websites. If Canada is a country at times divided, then Omar Kadir now has his own sense of that reality, especially if he has read or heard the things that have been said about him in the past 24 hours. An editorial in the Toronto Sun on Thursday called Kadir a I'm getting choked up on this, a security risk, reminding readers that his late father was a confidant of Osama bin Laden, and labeling his relatives Canada's first family of terrorism. By that argument, the Toronto Star reached a much different conclusion. Quote, Canada's image as a nation that upholds civil rights and the rule of law has been tarnished by this affair, and it won't soon recover, the Star opened in its own editorial. Much of the discussion has focused on Kadir's first public appearance before TV cameras since his arrest 13 years ago. On Thursday, when asked about violent extremism, Kadir said, that's not something I believe in right now. The questions began immediately. What exactly did he mean by that? One of Kadir's lawyers, Nate Whitling, was asked about that comment on Friday during an interview with CBC News. Quote, there is not a single radical thought in Omar Kadir's head, he said. Many Canadians, including Prime Minister Stephen Harper, continue Kadir as a terrorist, a man who admitted to and was justly convicted of war crimes. Whitling insisted again on Friday, as the defense team has for more than a decade, that Kadir was never a terrorist, that he was simply a teen caught up in the post-September 11th war in Afghanistan, a boy manipulated by his own father. On Thursday, Kadir apologized for the pain he caused. Whitling said it will ultimately be up to families of the victims to decide whether to accept his client's words. And whether or not they do, let us hope that they actually pray about it first, but knowing a lot of the laws that have been passed in Canada in the past few years, I'm going to have to really... And now we go back to the U.S. for our U.S. news updates. You got it, Jay? You got it, Jay? Computer is, though, sometimes. A judge declared a mistrial in the Eaton Pats case on Friday after jurors said for a third time that they couldn't reach a verdict despite 3 weeks of deliberation, leaving unresolved a missing child case that has vexed New York City for decades. This from the New York Times. The jury of 7 men and 5 women said they were firmly deadlocked in deciding the fate of Pedro Hernandez, a disabled factory worker from New Jersey. After the mistrial, jurors told reporters during a lone holdout who would not vote to convict Mr. Hernandez. The murder trial in state Supreme Court in Manhattan turned on a confession Mr. Hernandez gave 33 years after Eaton, who was 6, vanished in 1979 while walking to a school bus stop in Soho. The prosecution said the admission proved his guilt. The defense called it a fiction invented under pressure from the police. Resolved an investigation that bedeviled the New York police for decades and led to major reforms in the way that authorities around the country tracked child abduction. It also extended the uncertainty that year after year has tortured Pat's family since May 25th, 1979, when their son, wearing a pilot's cap and carrying a small bag full of toy cars, disappeared on the way to school. Eaton's mother testified that it was the first day she allowed her son to walk the bus stop alone, and in no small measure, her nightmarish story came to embody the worst fears of American parents. Eaton's picture was one of the first to appear on a milk carton. Justice Maxwell Wiley's decision to declare a mistrial came after jurors sent a note at 2:50 p.m. today saying they were still deadlocked after nearly 3 weeks. It was the third time the jury had reported it couldn't reach a verdict. Previously, Justice Wiley ordered jurors to keep deliberating. On Friday, after jurors again reached an impasse, he said, "I think at this point I would have to call the deliberations at an end and dismiss them." The mistrial leaves District Attorney Cyrus R. Vance Jr. with a hard decision. Either pursue another costly trial with the same evidence that failed to convince the first jury, or allow a man who confessed to murdering a child to go free. After the mistrial, Mr. Vance issued a statement saying he believed Mr. Hernandez was guilty, but did not indicate what trial. Stay with us here at the Evan Miller Report. We will keep an eye on this trial, and if any relevant updates come up, I will bring them to you, or I'll post them up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. When spring arrives in Oklahoma and conditions are right for tornadoes, David Wheeler and his family don't take any chances. This from the AP. 2 years ago, a top-of-the-scale twister tore a miles-long path through this Oklahoma City suburb and turned Wheeler's son's school into a pile of rubble. That's when he installed a small underground shelter in his garage. Now the family regularly drills on what to do if the skies turn ominous. The Wheeler family retreated underground nearly a dozen times on Wednesday night when a powerful thunderstorm that rumbled across the southern plains produced more than 50 tornadoes. The menacing clouds had barely vanished.
All right, folks. States. Looks like we lost Corey Evan there for a moment. Had a bad connection. We do have some rain coming here in Southern California. Could be those satellites there for a minute. So let's see if we can get him back there. Just let me click here.
Is it working now? Is it working now?
Have you back? Let's go.
Is it working now?
Yes, you're here.
There we are. Darn satellite going out. We gotta improve the waterproofing seals on that. Any rate, the Plains states were not the only ones with threatening skies. Twin weather systems stretching from the Carolinas to California produced an unseasonably early tropical storm in the Atlantic and a late snowstorm in the Rocky Mountains. Snow was also possible in the Nebraska Panhandle, which could get up to 5 inches, and parts of South Dakota, which could receive as much as a foot, according to the Weather Service. And a woman who was struck and killed by a packed duck boat tour bus while she was crossing a downtown Philadelphia street Friday, according to local reports, as investigators worked to remove the woman's body from underneath the amphibious bus. Passengers were ordered to remain on board for nearly an hour, NBC Philadelphia reported. A large yellow tarp appeared to be the only thing blocking those passengers' view of the gruesome scene underneath. The victim, identified as 68 years old, was crossing an intersection in the city's Chinatown section when she was struck around 5:15 p.m., WPVI reported. Her identity has not been released. Calls to the tour boat company were not immediately returned to the New York Daily News. Very unfortunate thing that I have to send us. More amphibious bus drivers realize that they have a very dangerous craft under them, even if it is buoyant. Right, it is indeed break time, but when we come back, in addition to Uber making their bid for the latest technology from Nokia, there are many more people this year than any year since 2005 planning to use Uber as they celebrate Memorial Day. There's actually 2 oil companies paying big to settle this pollution lawsuit, so this ought to be a big one in Los Angeles. And it's going to be a big weekend again for the Avengers as a whole bunch of lackluster films make their way to the box office, at least according to the critics. And what do you got for us, Jay?
Thank you very much, Corey. We have the latest on the post-UK elections. A report coming from the BBC's James Landell is next, followed by analysis by Andrew Lowe and Orlean Koehle, SHR Media Global Affairs correspondent. That's coming up on the Evan Miller Report on the other side of this break. We'll be right back. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Let's get back to the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
And welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. More with our guest in just a moment on the UK general elections. But first, a breakdown of the elections of what has happened in the past 24 hours in the UK with an extended report tonight from the BBC's James Landell.
They're scenes we were told not to expect for weeks. A short journey that would be taken only after days of negotiations. But instead, David Cameron and his wife travelled to Buckingham Palace today to tell the Queen that he would, after all, be staying on as her Prime Minister. But unlike 5 years ago, he returned to Downing Street not as the leader of a coalition, but the master of his own house.
I've just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, and I will now form a majority Conservative government.
And after an election that strained the ties that bind Scotland and England, the Prime Minister promised to govern as a party of one nation, one United Kingdom.
I have always believed in governing with respect. That's why in the last Parliament we devolved power to Scotland and Wales and gave the people of Scotland a referendum on whether to stay inside the United Kingdom. In this Parliament, I will stay true to my word and implement as fast as I can the devolution that all parties agreed for Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland.
His defeated opponent also went on a journey, also with his wife, but they went to Labour headquarters to thank his party for the hard work that in the end had not paid off. The responsibility, Ed Miliband said, was his alone.
And now it's time for someone else to take forward the leadership of this party. So I'm tendering my resignation.
It was not the speech they'd wanted to hear. It was not the speech he'd wanted to give.
I am truly sorry I did not succeed. I've done my best for nearly 5 years. Now you need to show your responsibility. Your responsibility, not simply to mourn our defeat, but to pick yourself up and continue the fight. We've come back before, and this party will come back again.
But will his party come back again too? Nick Clegg's Lib Dems suffered devastating losses with just 8 MPs remaining in Parliament. And
for that, of course, I must take responsibility, and therefore I announce that I will be resigning as leader of the Liberal Democrats.
History, he said, would judge the Lib Dems more kindly than the voters, who'd inflicted what he called a crushing and unkind blow on the party. But that was little comfort for his supporters.
Fear and grievance have won. Liberalism has lost. But it is more precious than ever, and we must keep fighting for it. This is a very dark hour for our party, but we cannot and will not allow decent liberal values to be extinguished overnight. Our party will come back. Our party will win again.
The party that won last year's European elections today won millions of votes and came second in many seats in the north of England. But tonight, UKIP has just one MP, and it's not him. Nigel Farage had promised to resign if he didn't win Thanet South, so...
But I'm a man of my word. I don't break my word. So I should be writing to the UK UKIP National Executive in a few minutes, saying that I am standing down as leader of UKIP.
Although inevitably, he didn't rule out standing again one day. The night had begun with a shock.
Here it is, 10 o'clock, and we are saying the Conservatives are the largest party.
Few could believe it.
If this exit poll is right, Andrew, I will publicly eat my hat on your programme.
But as the night wore on, it became clear the exit poll was right. The Conservatives were taking seats from the Lib Dems and holding off Labour, the first party of government to increase its seats and votes for years. No wonder the Chancellor was smiling. The Tories succeeded in part because Labour did not, failing to make gains in key marginal seats across England, and elsewhere even losing seats, including that held by the Shadow Chancellor.
Any personal disappointment I have at this result is as nothing compared to the sense of sorrow I have at the result that Labour has achieved across the United Kingdom.
But Labour's worst losses were in Scotland, where the party was all but wiped out, with just one MP now representing what was once Labour's heartland. So out went the party leader in Scotland, Jim Murphy, and the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Douglas Alexander. And it was her party that had caused all the damage. The Scottish National Party almost swept the board, winning 56 MPs in an unstoppable landslide.
The Scottish lion has roared this morning across the country.
The Nationalists took seats not just from Labour but also the Lib Dems, who suffered huge losses south of the border, a party punished for joining the coalition and not living up to all its promises. A party that lost most of its big names: Vince Cable, Danny Alexander, Simon Hughes and Charles Kennedy, all ousted from Parliament. It was a day that defied the polls and surprised the media, a day that transformed the political map of Britain. So after all the talk of hung parliaments and coalitions and deals, tonight, once again, we have a government run by one party. And for the first time, David Cameron is in Downing Street with a real mandate to do what he wants. The only question is how much he's constrained by the smallness of his majority. For now, Ed Miliband and Nick Clegg had one last duty: to lay a wreath at the cenotaph to mark VE Day. They had hoped to be in government, but it was not to be, for they lost, and David Cameron won what he called the sweetest victory of all. James Landell, BBC News, Westminster.
And many thanks to James Landell for the latest on the UK elections, and we'll have more on VE Day later on in the broadcast here on the Evan Miller Report. All right, folks. Well, right now, joining us now from our Sacramento studios is Orlean Koehle. She is our SHR Media Global Affairs correspondent. Andrew Lowe is with us as well. He was with us on last night's election coverage and joins us back now. And, of course, Corey Evans is with us as well to help us break down these UK elections. Andrew, I'd like to start off with you tonight. My goodness, we were expecting the Conservatives to win last night, but I wasn't expecting them to win this big.
That is correct. You know, we talked about them needing some other parties to help them tip that balance of power in their favor, and while they just brought it home over the threshold all by themselves.
I know, it's surprising to me. Why do you think the
It's definitely what us Americans would call a grand slam. Sorry.
Yeah, certainly right, Corey. Andrew, why do you think the Conservatives won out so big? What did Labour do so wrong?
Well, it sounds really like there was good turnout. The base really, I think, have spoken and said that they support the austerity and the more conservative fiscal policy of the Tories. That's really what it looks like to me.
Also, if I could add something, Jason.
Sure.
From my research, Nick Clegg, who was the head of the Labour or the Liberal Democrats, they really lost big. And
yes.
Back in 2010, they had done really quite well. In fact, they called it Cleggomania. But they had promised all of these huge promises, one of which was they were going to abolish the student tuition fees. And that didn't happen at all. In fact, the student tuition fees tripled. So that's why many people were not trusting him and not trusting the Liberal Democrats. So they went from 57
There's
seats
already
in
been
2010.
quite a few resignations as well.
They went from 57 seats in 2010 down to just 8 seats. So they really lost big time. And I think, as Andrew said, there was just a feeling of not trusting the Liberals and having more trust in the Conservative platform and what those promises were.
Eventually, lies catch up to them. That's what it all boils down to. That
yes, certainly right on that. And Orlean, you were right on the button with the Liberal Democrats. Made a promise they couldn't keep, and the voters, they remember what you promised them. And, you know, I think people in the UK, they realized David Cameron couldn't do everything he promised because he had that coalition government in charge. Now that he has his own majority government in charge, Orlean, it now gives him a little bit more room to give the rest of his promises that he promised during the first election back in 2010 when he was running against Gordon Brown, then the Labour Prime Minister.
That's right. And one of those promises that I'm hoping he will keep is he's going to have a referendum to let the British vote if they want to still stay part of the European Union. And I think so many of them are disgusted with the European Union, and maybe they will vote it out.
That would be awesome.
It certainly would. Andrew, your take on when David Cameron will do this? Do you think that the British people will come behind him and vote the UK out of the EU completely?
Well, you know, that's a really tough question because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people out there that feel Europe is a really good thing. It's the way forward. It's the new merging of Europe that is the way to health, wealth, and prosperity. I, of course, don't buy into that, and there's many like me back home who don't buy it. But it will certainly be a tight margin on that vote, I would imagine.
In my book that I wrote by Stealth and Deception, Andrew, I have quite a few pages about the election that went on in Ireland to bring them into being a member of the European Union. And according to everything I had researched and reports I received, it was really a fraudulent vote. They totally changed the way that they collected the ballots, and many people thought that was just an absolute fraud, that whole election. Have you heard that as well?
Well, not. I haven't really. That was probably before I really woke up and started getting interested and involved in the political issues. That probably happened when I was still asleep and ignorant to the whole thing.
Well, I'll have to give you a copy of my book so you can read that. I think there was so much fraud going on just from some of the reports that so many of the people in Ireland were reporting. They were determined to get them into the EU. The first election they had, the Ireland people, the Irish, had said no. So the second election Sorry, I'm not from Ireland, so I do have Irish blood in me somewhere. Anyway, the second election, they decided they had to pull all sorts of shenanigans, and I believe that is exactly what happened. So they did end up being members of the EU, and I think a lot of their disgruntled Irish as well as lots of British who would like to pull out.
Yeah. Well, I definitely remember whenever they got into the Euro and we used to be able to go down, and a pint of Guinness would only have been maybe about 2 Irish punts, 2 Irish pounds, and pretty much overnight a pint went from that to being about €5. It was a real shock.
Well, I also write in my book what happened to the Germans when they had to enter in and have the euro. My husband has relatives in Germany and Austria, and they said that their whole pension that they had saved for retirement was suddenly gone. So it did devalue the German mark, and for them to think that this was the same equivalent, it wasn't. And I think a lot of people have suffered because of that.
And another thing I have to know with all these environmental regulations that we hear so much of today, one that I noted from the BBC's Top Gear program when they did their 100-pound car challenge is that before the EU came in, they actually had pretty much the same sort of thing that you've got in the U.S., where when your car was pretty much old and ruined, you could take it to the scrapyard and you get 20 quid or whatever it was, and you're done with it. But when the EU stepped in and said that you have to recycle completely all the bits of the car, or as much as possible, I heard from them you had to actually take it to the scrapyard and pay them 100 quid or whatever it was to take it off your hands. Their words, not mine.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. And, with the fisheries in Northern Ireland, where I'm from, have been screaming from the rooftops for a long time about the European regulations where we can't even fish our own waters. The quotas are so stringent that the Ulster fishermen can't make their living, and yet the Spanish and Portuguese can come over and fish our waters and have different quotas, and it's just an absolute mess,
It's corruption at its finest, really. When you think about it there. Well, I'd like to talk about more how this affects the European Union in just a moment, folks. But first, two things that struck me in this election. We were expecting big things out of the UKIP party, the UK Independence Party. Andrew, UKIP suffered big time last night. They, matter of fact, lost seats, not gained seats.
Yeah, and it's just disappointing because they still got almost 3 million votes, which is double the amount of votes the Scottish National Party got, yet the SNP managed to get 56 seats for their lower tally of votes. So I'm sure it's frustrating for the UKIP party. I don't really know what the answer is.
Do you think UKIP's going to have a comeback in what we would call midterm elections coming around in the UK? Do you think they have a comeback?
Well, they have a very strong, passionate base that are anti-Europe, and that's really where they started. They got their start with Nigel Farage in the European Parliament. So I would imagine that will still be around. It'll be interesting to see who rises as their new leader, and can they bring more followers into the party.
And
oh,
I'm sorry. I didn't
mean to
Jason, interrupt. Orlean
Jason,
first.
according to my information, they actually had bigger gains this election than in 2010. They had 12.6%, and last election they only had 3.1%. But for some reason, I guess it didn't win them. They only have one seat in Parliament. I'm not quite sure how that all works out, but they are making strides. It's just not showing. I think it's because those votes were spread out so far. And if they had been all in one certain district, then maybe they could have gained more seats.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Orlean. It's just that they have a wide base all over the country, yet not densely enough together where they can bring one of their candidates to the podium in first place.
And no offense to Nigel Farage, I like him as a candidate. I wish we had a candidate more like him here in the United States. But I think he was probably a little too brash, probably for most UK voters. They were probably thinking some thought of him. Who's this U.S. Yankee impersonating being a UK politician over here? We don't like this kind of person. He's a little too much for us.
Well, is he the one that will gain the one seat, do you think?
No. He apparently lost, and he did resign his position today.
Oh, that's too bad. I really liked him as well.
I certainly do as well. Do you think Nigel Farage will have a future within the UKIP party, and his political future is still looking good there, Andrew?
Well, the flip side, the argument that's always presented against UKIP is that they're a narrow-minded bunch of racists because they believe in having borders and strict immigration policy. So there's the broad support is there at the base. You have the English patriots that believe in what they're talking about. Having said that, the media love to paint them as a extremist, hard right, National Front racist group, which is, I think that's probably what hurt them with a number of the sort of middle of the road voters.
Well, and you think if the UK does have this referendum on the EU, this may help UKIP in the next election, because obviously David Cameron has came out and said he is not running again for a third term, so that means that the Conservatives, and it is being rumored that the Conservatives may throw the current mayor, who did get reelected last night as well, in London, Boris Johnson. And Orlean, I heard from Kel Fritz, our correspondent up in Canada last night when we were doing our election coverage, Boris is not too well liked amongst Conservatives. They think he's a very big moderate.
Interesting. I'll have to do research on him and follow him.
Well,
there's
will
just
see what
so many layers to this, isn't there?
Yeah,
yes.
There certainly
Oh,
is
yeah.
now. Now, another big part of this election, and you hinted to this, Andrew, is the very surprising win of the Scottish National Party. They defeated Labour big time over in Scotland last night, leaving only one Labour seat, one Tory seat, and one Lib Dem seat. Take us behind that, if you can, on how that even happened.
Well, that is interesting, and I have a very close friend who lives in the north of Scotland, and I haven't been able to speak with them about this. However, it is surprising after they rejected the independence, and yet here we are only a couple of months later, and it's been an overwhelming victory for the Scottish National Party. So,
Yes, they got 56 of 59 seats. That is amazing, isn't it?
Yep, really amazing.
It is, and Nicola Sturgeon, the new SNP leader of her party now, over in Scotland has now promised that there is going to be another referendum and that they would leave the UK if the Tory government and the likes of David Cameron came back as Prime Minister, and they would leave the UK and join the likes of the EU. Orlean, you've written Stealth and Deception. What do you think about the possibility of Scotland trying to remove themselves from the UK once again? They tried it once. They did not succeed. Do you think they will have a chance this time?
I hope they'll do more research on just what the European Union offers them, which is really nothing. It's very interesting, but I understand that they are kind of more of a big welfare state than the rest of the UK. Is that correct, Andrew?
Yeah, they're very big into their welfare state up there.
So they probably think the European Union will take care of them, and that's maybe why they're thinking.
Where does the welfare state thing sound so familiar? Oh, yeah, that's right. The U.S. has a problem as well. So I think I've got an idea of what's going on over there.
Yes, we are becoming more welfare all the time. That's very sad.
Well, you don't know the half of it here yet. I mean, we have really a huge amount of money that gets shelled out for this cradle-to-grave welfare back home in Britain. So it's been popularized by the media, and you know, it's really something that you are going to see more of here if the pendulum continues to swing the way it is.
Well, another issue that was agreed on by most of the parties, with the exception of, I think, UKIP over in the UK, Andrew, was the NHS. And the only issue that at least Labour and the Tories had when it came to the NHS was the funding of the NHS. And that was talked about a lot in the election. How much does that NHS cost the UK government and the British people each year to run? And how long will the UK be able to keep running with that NHS?
You know, I had these numbers when I last gave a speech in November about this, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it's a vast amount of money, something around 17 or 19 to 23% of the GDP that gets spent on healthcare, and it's really just out of control over there. The hospital, you know, because you can go to the hospital and you get seen for free, and you go supposedly free, and you go home, you got no bill to pay because it's taken care of by the taxpayer, and so you really have the moral hazard there of just going to the doctor for any little thing with no skin in the game. Now, there was an interesting article that came out probably 3, maybe 4 months ago from one of the leading administrators of the National Health Service, and his research was basically saying that it's completely unsustainable. It is looking at collapse within the next couple of years unless there's major reform and they start charging for a minimal amount for prescriptions and for doctor visits. And I know that won't be popular for people at home. We will just have to wait and see.
No wonder Jay was so disgusted with the NHS Act that came up during the opening show at the 2012 London Olympics.
Yeah, I was not very impressed by the likes of that. And of course, Obamacare here, Andrew, as you know, was popular. So
it's absolutely
whatever
no better
happens here in the UK seems to be reflecting here in the US. We're only getting started on what you guys have, I think, been putting up with for at least the last 3 decades.
Oh yeah, look, it's a mess. A lot of my friends at home are professionals from the dental industry, from our profession rather, the optometrists and even medical doctors, and it's just rife with waste, fraud, and abuse. That's really what it comes down to. There's no way to police it because there's such vast numbers, And you even get, in some communities, you even get experts at gaming the system, where within their communities, people will come to this expert who knows the paperwork inside out and can help them complete the paperwork to then be eligible for the maximum amount of benefits. And it's just that, it gets totally out of control.
Now, David Cameron has suggested, or he's been accused by the likes of former Labor leader, I have to get used to calling him former Labor leader, Ed Miliband. During the election, of trying to privatize the NHS. Can the NHS be privatized, Andrew? Can it be fixed that way, or does it just need to be tossed aside completely, or is it too late? The UK is just so webbed with this NHS now, they can't really get out of this at this point.
Well, I would say that any introduction of the free market to that system is only going to drive costs down. It's only going to be a good thing to bring more choice, competition, and lower pricing. Of course, that's a very typical argument of the left, that you're privatizing it, and so it's going to be the big bad corporations out to make their money. The reality is it needs to happen. That the system can't continue to lose money every year, and I would be for a very open and free market approach to healthcare. I think that's definitely going to be an advantage to the patient at the end of the day.
The private markets are the only ones that can actually figure out how to do things cheaper as far as healthcare goes.
Exactly. Now, at home, that mindset is a long way from being the commonplace train of thought. The idea of having to pay for your health services is just frightening to the people at home. They feel that it's something that should be taken care of collectively, and that having a bill for your medical procedures, that is just so foreign. There's a long road to travel in educating them and getting over that bridge.
Now, Andrew, David Cameron has already went to the Queen of England. Obviously, for the folks who don't know, the UK still does have a monarchy amongst them. And usually the rules, if I know it correctly, is when a government is supposed to be established, the Prime Minister goes to the Queen and says, we would like to start a government. He doesn't have to start a coalition this time, obviously, because he has enough seats. He needed 326. He got 331. And so he went to the Queen, obviously, early this morning, as James Landell related in his report from the BBC. And he has formed that government. What do you expect him to first work on with his new majority government?
Well, first of all, I think it's interesting that in this day and age, they still have to go to the Queen and ask for permission to start the government. Isn't that a very fascinating concept? I kind of find it funny now that I'm here in America.
It shows that the British love their formality and staying with tradition. It's not that, she's nothing more than a figurehead, but it's interesting how they still go through these same rituals that they've been doing for hundreds of years.
Yeah, and Kel Fritz reported last night, during our broadcast last night, she said if God forbid, last night, if it became a hung parliament and they would not be able to get a government formulated, Orlean, I found it interesting. Kel told me that the Queen can still take charge in certain situations, and that if the Prime Minister could not form a government between David Cameron or even Ed Miliband, if he became the minority Prime Minister and the government couldn't be formed together and they had to have a new election in July, the Queen could technically take charge of the country until that new election is over. That's interesting. I did not know that. According to what I read on May 27th...
But her age, it could be quite complicated.
Yes, on May 27th, she is to then give a speech at Westminster, and her speech will outline the new government agenda and the basis for the first formal vote of the new parliament. So she still has influence in the very beginning of this new parliament. So that's interesting as well.
All right. Well, we have much more to talk about, I'm sure, on these UK elections. Final thoughts from you, Orlean and Andrew. First, Andrew, I'd like to start with you. Final thought on these UK elections.
Well, overall, I think it's going to be good, really, for Britain. Certainly, the Conservatives are going to try and rein in the spending. They're going to try and make those tough choices that nobody really wants to have to go through, but they understand that it's got to be done. It looks like the voters agreed with that idea. So I think overall it's a good step to keep stability in the country.
And what I believe is that this will be good as well, especially if David Cameron can keep his promises and there can be a referendum, so the British will have the opportunity to eventually to get out of the EU, and that would make a big difference. I also hope
that would be really exciting.
I hope that they can do something with the enormous Islam problem that they are now having in England. I heard about all these over 100 girls that were kidnapped and forced into prostitution. So they have an enormous problem with all the Muslims coming in, and maybe David Cameron can do something to rein that in as well.
Definitely hope that weighs in on their minds the next time that anyone there goes out for a curry.
Curry. A funny thing to be talking about after a UK election is a curry, and honest to say, I may know a lot about British politics, Andrew, but I don't have the faintest idea what a curry is.
Well, I can tell you, it wouldn't take you too long when you get to England to figure out what a curry is. You know, my brother lives in London.
They love their Indian cuisine, Jay.
So he lives in London, and one of the first things that he likes to do when I come to visit is go to one of the local pubs, and they quite often serve curry and a pint for 10 quid, and I can tell you it goes down all right.
Wow. Andrew, with this new Conservative government, obviously not right away, but in the next couple of years, would you consider revisiting the UK to see how the UK is doing today? Or is it much better just to stay here on the other side of the pond, as they like to call it?
Well, for the foreseeable future, I'm happy here. Such is the environment at home that there's just not the opportunity that I'm enjoying here, and so I'm not going to rush back. Let's put it that way.
That's good, because we love having you here, Andrew. Andrew is such a great speaker for telling us what life was like under total socialism when he lived in Ireland. So we love having you here.
I think the freedom is wearing off on him, Orlean. That's probably what it is.
I think you're right.
All right.
I appreciate that.
Yes, we appreciate you coming over here and giving us your analysis and being on the air.
Yes, you're good
not
influence, man.
Today and yesterday. Orlean Koehle, SHR Media's Global Affairs correspondent, and Andrew Lowe, former Irish, I wouldn't say former Irish citizen, but I would say he used to live in Ireland and now lives here in the U.S. Thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and take a short break here on the Evan Miller Report. When we come back, Corey Evan has tonight's business report. We'll be right back after these messages.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
At St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, our discoveries have helped drive the childhood cancer survival rate from 20% to 80%. And we share our research all across America.
I'm 80% sure I'll spoil my kids. I'm 80% sure I'll break boys' hearts. I'm 80% sure we're chick magnets.
80%? I'll take those odds.
Give thanks for the healthy kids in your life and give to those who are not. Go to stjude.org or shop wherever you see the St. Jude logo.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
That's the closing bell, so here comes your business report on the Evan Miller Report. I'm Corey Evan. Thanks for sticking with us. The Dow was up 267 points. The first bid 18,191. The NASDAQ picked up 58 points at 50.03, and the S&P 500 28 points up at 21.16. Rather sunny over there, unlike much of the country. Milder weather helped the labor market shake off a winter chill in April as employers added 223,000 to USA Today. The unemployment rate fell from 5.5 to 5.4%, the lowest since May 2008, they say. Wall Street breathed a sigh of relief as a result, with the Dow gaining all those gains, and economists surveyed by Action Economics expected payroll gains of 225,000 according to their median forecast. March gains were revised down to 85,000 for a previously reported 126,000, the Labor Department said Friday. February's payroll gains were revised up 2,000 to 266K. Businesses added 213,000 jobs on strong advances by pro and business services, healthcare, and construction. Federal, state added 10,000. Mining employment continued to decline, falling by 15K as energy companies shed workers because of low crude prices. Wage growth, sluggish through the recovery, ticked up a bit. Average hourly earnings increased 3 cents to $24.87 an hour. It is a plus, but It's a very negligible one, I say. Over the past year, pay is up 2.2%, in line with previous tepid advances. According to 3 anonymous sources with the New York Times, Uber is supposedly offering up to $3 billion for Nokia's mapping service here. This follows reports by the Wall Street Journal that 3 German automakers, BMW, Audi, and Daimler-Benz, have banded together to make a bid for the service with the Chinese service engine Baidu. And by the way, I say Benzo to refer to Mercedes-Benz. Here is Nokia's take on step-by-step directions, here being the name of the program, HERE. While some consumers may be unfamiliar with it, one source with the Wall Street Journal described it as the most advanced digital mapping service in the world. Second only to Google's service, Nokia... Yes, I know, right? I borrowed that from Jeremy Clarkson. Yes, he may be gone from Top Gear, but he still influences me. But anyway, second only to Google, Nokia has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into mapping software to keep it as up-to-date as possible from year to year. Creating a reliable mapping service is time-intensive and expensive, and Nokia has generated a valuable archive of resources for data companies and self-driving cars. 80% of the global market for built-in navigation systems currently relies on a mix of its own mapping data and Google Maps, the latter of which it depends on more heavily because it's more accurate, as I've found anyway. Acquiring HERE would not only give Uber the opportunity to free itself from Google, but also assisting in expanding cab-sharing service Uber Pool. Analysts told New York Times the buyout would give Uber access to a fully established digital mapping business, additionally adding that since its cab-sharing service works using geospatial mapping data to pair riders with drivers, obtaining HERE would be like hitting the jackpot. And with more money in markets thanks to lower gas prices, AAA expects more than 37 million Americans to travel for Memorial Day, the most since 2005. AAA said Friday, according to the Star Tribune, that the number of Americans or more will rise 4.7% to 37.2 mil over the period of May 21st to May 25th. Nearly 9 of 10 drivers, or 33 million, will drive to their destination, making for crowded highways, people. Gasoline should be around $1 cheaper this Memorial Day, unless you live in California. The average price for a gallon of gas Friday was $2.66. Last year was $3.66. AAA says the number of people flying should rise 2.5%. A thriving stock market has boosted the net worth of wealthier Americans who more easily can afford to fly for vacation. The economy is strong enough, they say, to give consumers more confidence to travel. As I mentioned earlier, the employers added 223,000 jobs, and AAA is suggesting cabin fever may play a role as well. The total number of travelers and number opting to drive should be the highest since 2005, when 44 million people traveled, 37.3 million, of them by car, Jay. But what are your plans for Memorial Day? Gonna have a little staycation, or are you staying home because of obligations?
Due to contract obligations at this station, I will be staying home, I'm sure, for this time around. You
Bummer.
know, it's funny with those gas prices. I was in the grocery store today, and on my way home from the grocery store, literally saw the gas prices on the little digital gas price thing here in California on the road that I was driving home from. It's a little digital one. I saw them go blank for about 2 seconds, and I saw the price of gas jump 3 cents in 10 seconds. It went from $3.49 to $3.51.
I wonder how many times that happened at the station I filled up at, because it's a brand new station. Actually got some of the lower prices in town, or at least it did that week. And then I went to fill up that morning after I got off work. And then the afternoon when I carpooled with Jason, we passed by that same one, and I pointed it out to Jay that station's prices were $3.25 that morning, and it had jumped already to $3.39. So this is coming up pretty fast here. They must really want to pad their wallets this Memorial Day.
And on top of it, they're going to try switching over to that summer blend.
Dear, it's supposed to be less polluting, but really, I bet it doesn't do crud.
That and the government drought they like to keep forcing down our throats. All right,
Jerry,
that's
Jerry, Jerry.
Yes, indeed, Jerry. He continues to suck the life out of the regular Californian that they can't.
So that's how he stays young. He sucks all our energy out of us.
Yeah, there it goes. Corey Evan with What They Say in the Business News. Thank you very much for that. All right, Corey Evan will be back in just a couple moments here with the latest on our continuing battle against global socialism tonight. All right, folks, we got a couple of political headlines to headline today. Not to say we haven't talked politics, it's more international politics. Now here we're going to talk a little more politics closer to home. The state of Illinois Supreme Court has forced the state Friday to find another way to fix the nation's worst government employee pension crisis, ruling lawmakers overstepped by enacting a law that slashed retirement benefits to confront a massive budget deficit. But in an unanimous decision that frequently scolded state policymakers, 7 justices declared that the measure that former Democratic Governor Pat Quinn signed into law 18 months ago violates the state's constitution because it would leave pension promises diminished or impaired. The cash-strapped state now must again grapple with a $111 billion deficit in what's necessary to cover its employee retirement obligations. The hole is so deep, the state has in recent years had to reserve up to $7 billion or 1/5 of its annual operating funds to keep pace. The plan rejected by the justices was designed to whittle down the monstrous shortfall over 30 years gradually, but significantly slicing back pension benefits by erasing a 3% annual adjustment. Lawmakers who spent years working toward a consensus acknowledge the ruling creates a major dilemma now for the newly elected Republican governor, Bruce Rayner, and the Democrats who still control the General Assembly. More U.S. national politics now. Over in the U.S. Senate, Republican leaders insist that spy agencies continue to have access to data on Americans' telephone calls despite a court ruling that the practice is illegal. But aides said on Friday they may have to compromise on proposed reforms of the program before it expires on June 1st of this year. Senate aides said the deadline could force supporters and opponents of bulk data collection program to work out a deal before May ends. In practice, the date may be even earlier as Congress leaves Washington on May 22nd for their Memorial Day recess. Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican Majority Leader and BS artist, and Richard Burr, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, defended the data collection shortly after a federal appeals court 3-judge panel in New York ruled the practice illegal on Thursday. The black iron fence surrounding the White House will be topped with a new row of sharp metal points upcoming in July. This, according to the U.S. Secret Service yesterday, part of a series of security upgrades for the famous mansion where the president and his family live. The planned changes were sparked by an intrusion last September when an Iraqi war veteran carrying a knife scaled the fence, ran across the north lawn, and entered the residence running through a large ballroom before being tackled by a Secret Service officer. The incident was one of several embarrassing breaches for the agency, which is responsible for the security of President Obama and led to the resignation of the agency's director. And ladies and gentlemen, on a very sad note, but a very thankful note today, we mark 70 years since the conclusion of the Second World War. And ladies and gentlemen, I had a grandfather who served in that war, and I happened to go visit him today, and we talked about his time in the service and where he was. He was in Europe at the conclusion of the Second World War. Absolutely amazing that we still have so many veterans from the greatest generation still with us. And my goodness, as I mentioned, it is marking 70 years today for Victory in Europe Day, also known as VE Day. For more on today's events that happened here in the United States and was as referenced in the previous report by James Landell in Europe today, but here in the U.S., here is more from the BBC's Jane O'Brien, who was in Washington for today's events.
Two Corsairs fly low over the Washington Monument, part of an unprecedented display of air power from a bygone era. The Flying Fortress, Warhawks, Wildcats, and Mustangs. These are the warbirds that helped secure victory for the Allies in World War II. And then there's Fifi, the only B-29 bomber still flying today, the same model that dropped the first atomic bomb and ultimately ended the war.
World War II for the American people was a pivotal event like the Revolutionary Wars or the Civil War. And this is one of the last opportunities we've got to commemorate that event while significant numbers of people who lived through it are still alive.
56 vintage aircraft took part in the flyover, including the P-51 Mustang, the fighter that protected American bombers as they made raids deep into Germany. There are only 6 P-51C Mustangs still flying, and I got to ride in one of them. This was the plane every fighter pilot wanted to fly, its performance virtually unrivaled, and after 20 minutes in the air, it was easy to see why.
That was amazing. What a visceral experience. We were flying at about 3,500 feet, going at about 250 miles an hour, which is nothing for this plane, apparently. And at one point we were doing a turn and I felt about 2 Gs of force. And the blood rush to the head was extraordinary. I've never felt anything like it. And of course it's so cramped in there, it's hot, it's noisy, it's smelly. I want to do it again.
And many of the pilots who flew these planes for real would also do it again.
I have very vivid memories of World War II. We need to understand those things, and when you see a threat, we need to be patriotic, we need to get together, we need to find out what to do and, do it.
This commemoration is intended to keep that spirit alive, and it's a reminder of something else. The missing man formation, in which one plane peels away from the others, pays homage to those who didn't make it home. A final tribute to the men and women known as the greatest generation. Jane O'Brien, BBC News, Washington.
Many thanks to Jane O'Brien for bringing us that report. 70 years since the conclusion of World War II, where we, right along with the Allies, defeated the likes of Germany. Such a touching report, and considering, Corey, that we all had relatives who served in that war, and that the greatest generation is now dying off, certainly makes you think, what would have happened, Corey, if that greatest generation did not do what they did?
It's amazing to think that the very freedoms that we enjoy today all rested on their shoulders. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you know a veteran from that era, be sure to definitely give them the thanks that they very richly deserve.
Well said, Corey Evan. Well said. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the latest in our continuing battle tonight on, what do we call it, Cor?
That's our continuing battle against global socialism! And on that note, our first report comes to us from NOLA.com. NOLA.com, excuse me. This week, more than 320,000 Louisiana students took tests produced by the Partnership for Assessment Readiness for College and Careers, though a few boycotts. It's a relatively small number, state officials said. Parents will not receive test results until this fall. However, here are some of what parents may expect when those scores do get stored and then delivered, according to Pearson. 5 performance levels will be used to judge student understanding: minimal, partial, moderate, strong, or distinguished. Level score indicates minimal, and level 5 is Number 2, the test scores show how students perform compared to other students in the same grade at the same school, across the school system, across the state, and the partnership tests. That's a change from Louisiana's LEAP test scores, which measured student success only in Louisiana. English language arts score reports will show student performance in both reading and writing, and parents will be able to see how their children's performance in area compares with all other students at level 4, those who are well prepared for the next grade. The Louisiana Department of Education contracts with data recognition score tests and will produce its own version of score reports. However, those reports will include very similar data to what the partnership uses, according to department spokesman Ken Pastoric. Oh dear, kind of reminds me of when I had to take California high school exit exam. And I'll go ahead and send this over to Jay, and I'll let him publish this up on the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. And Jay, you know, we don't like the Common Core tests, and it is my hope that the folks in Louisiana realize just how bad it is as we have.
Yes, certainly do, Corey Evan. We will certainly keep an eye on the state of Louisiana to be sure and give you any updates in regards to that. Hopefully there are some kids out there who boycott that thing.
Yes, those would be the smart ones, I say. And here's another one that really rattles my feathers. A barbecue restaurant in northern Colorado is being criticized for its plan to give white customers a 10% discount. This from the AP. Edgar Antillon...
my 50% discount? What's wrong? We're a minority
I said
now.
10, Jay. 10%.
Oh, I want 50%. 10's not good enough.
Yeah, actually, I kind of agree with you, but we take what we can get these days. Anyway, Edgar Antillon, owner of Rub and Butts Barbecue, there's a name for you, and it's also a country cafe in Milliken, he hung a sign reading White Appreciation Day, June 11th, because all Americans should be celebrated. Antillon, who was born to Mexican parents, pointed to Black History Month and Hispanic Heritage Month. He tells KUSA TV in Denver he figured the least we could do is offer one day to appreciate white Americans. Ricardo Romero, a civil rights activist in northern Colorado, called the plan a perpetuation of racism. Jennifer McPherson with the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agency says people who believe they are discriminated against can file a complaint with the Civil Rights Division. And I wonder how many are going to do that. Few, I bet you.
Well, the day people
liberal.
file a complaint against the Civil Rights Division on black people and Hispanic people getting their own holiday, then will be the day then I will file a complaint that's saying that being a white person and celebrating a white appreciation day is racist, ladies and gentlemen. This is just political correctness being shoved down our throats once again.
And without any milk, might I add. You got that theme ready, Jake?
Yes, we do.
So, why is it a crime to be a white person these days? And why is it so expedient for kids to sacrifice their free time to please Bill Gates? Why? And why isn't there an owner's manual in my glove box, please? Stay tuned for developments in our continuing battle against global socialism.
Corey Evan with the why in tonight's global socialism. Thank you very much for that. And on that note, it's time for tonight's
And now it's time for Lawsuits Across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Thank you as always, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated, come to order. We'll get through this as quickly as we can. Lawsuits Across America for this Friday is now in session. First item on the docket, Texas energy companies ConocoPhillips and Phillips 66 will pay a total of $11.5 million to settle a lawsuit alleging that hundreds of their gas stations violated California anti-pollution laws since 2006, according to the LA Times. The civil complaint filed in January 2013 alleged that the Houston-based companies violated state laws on the operation and maintenance of underground gasoline storage tanks at more than 560 gas stations in the state. These violations included failing to properly maintain leak detection devices, testing secondary containment systems, conducting monthly inspections, and training employees in proper protocol, according to a statement from the Office of California Attorney General Kamala Harris. A statewide investigation found hazardous materials and hazardous waste law violations at gas stations in 34 counties, they say. ConocoPhillips and Phillips 66 have sold nearly all of their interest in the underground storage tank sites in the state. The district attorneys from Alameda County, El Dorado County, Merced County, Nevada County, Placer County, San Bernardino raise the alarm bells, ladies and gentlemen. This here's local to us, boys. Here.
Asinine, man.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I had to make a San Bernardino joke. Yeah, I know, very local. But Stanislaus County jointly filed the complaint along with Harris's office. A confidential letter sent... Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I gotta wrap up one lawsuit before moving on to the next one. Yeah. But yes, I will keep an eye on this one, and if anything else comes up in the two defendants settling this lawsuit, I'll let you know. But hopefully, for the moment, it is well and truly behind us. Next up, a confidential... Yes, I know, San Bernardino, Jay. Next up, a confidential letter sent by top Ameren executives to doctors clearly demonstrates, according to Forbes, the lawsuit the company yesterday against the FDA has far more to do with speech. Ameren said it's suing the FDA to gain the right to disseminate information about Vascepa that would support use of the drug beyond its currently highly restricted FDA-approved indication. This, according to the Forbes and New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. But free speech in the corporate world in general and the pharmaceutical in particular means something quite different from what our country's founding fathers might have imagined, Jay. In this world, free speech is really paid for, often handsomely, and the companies and people who pay out the money maintain exquisite control over that quote-unquote free speech. At the same time, Ameren announced that it had filed its lawsuit. It sent a confidential letter to physicians who serve on its speakers bureau and who are paid to speak to the physicians on behalf of the company. Every company has a similar program for its drugs. The Ameren letter makes it clear that physicians who speak on behalf of Ameren don't have free speech. They must adhere to strict guidelines of the company. Many of these guidelines are in place to make sure that the talks fall within what the FDA permits the company to say, but many of the talking points represent the company's best efforts to spin the available data and literature. There's no attempt to present a balanced position representing the views of the company's critics, for instance. Much of the letter won't come as a surprise to industry observers. Forbes has known for a long time that this sort of thing goes on all the time, but let me just look at this one key sentence toward the end of the letter. It's crystal clear that in this lawsuit, free speech is being used solely for marketing efforts. Quote, if we receive a judgment in our favor, we will move rapidly to deliver to you additional company-approved training and updated promotional speaker materials related to the court's interpretation of free speech related to the anchor results. Ameren's notion that the First Amendment protects and enhances the free speech of corporations, but severely limits the speech of individual people. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Some corporate America folks aren't in it for the best interests of America, just to make money for themselves.
Corey
and fun.
Wow.
Yes, I am making it.
What a lawsuit you've uncovered there. Free speech, not so free anymore, is it?
Unfortunately. And here's something that's not so free anymore. Banking. The LA City Attorney is now suing Wells Fargo over nationwide practices reported by the LA Times this week. The suit grows out of the way Wells Fargo makes its money, less on big Wall Street trades than in ordinary bank business. Checking accounts and mortgages, that sort of thing. The lawsuit alleges Wells Fargo tried too hard, imposing unrealistic sales quotas on employees who then opened up new accounts for credit cards in customers' names without them knowing. E. Scott Reckard first reported on these practices for the LA Times, and I will go ahead and send that one over to Jay to post up on the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report, and it's starting to give me the hiccups, Jay. Oh, man, that is just one of those things that...
to me. Come on.
I'm so sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen.
Hiccups, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, excuse me. Let's get to the entertainment report.
Yes, but first let me just declare lawsuits across America case for this Friday and wish all of our lawsuits fans a happy weekend.
Yes.
Now I can finally tell you that it is Colombian-born actress Sofia Vergara, one of the stars of comedy hit series Modern Family, receiving that star on the Walk of Fame, according to Reuters. It's number 2,551 on the renowned Hollywood Boulevard.
So
yes,
what, they
Vergara,
give her a starfish?
Yeah, I think they gave her Patrick Starr, who is now spewing all sorts of dumb-minded insults, but I'll quote him later on that. Vergara, the overpaid actress on U.S. television, the highest paid the last 3 years according to Forbes, posed by her new plaque with fiancé Joe Manganiello, I think it is, and other family cast members. The actress had earlier appeared on Good Morning Asinine, where she spoke of her ongoing frozen embryo battle with her ex-fiancé Nick Lowe. Businessman Lowe filed a lawsuit last year seeking to take 2 frozen embryos the couple created to split. In a New York Times op-ed last month, he wrote that after the pair separated last year, he sought to take the embryos to have them carried to term, pay all the expenses, and raise their children. Vergara refused, denying those little bodies their right to life. Are you, Vergara? That sounds pretty liberal, doesn't it, Jay?
Disturbing, isn't it?
Yes, it officially. Where's Charles Nelson Riley with the bug?
Oh, wait a minute. I think I have a sound effect in here that perfectly describes this, ladies and gentlemen. The opinions of Sophie Vergara, officially what, Master Computer? What do we think about that? Stinks. Yes, it does stink. Now back to court.
There's Charles Nelson Riley there. Yes, I actually got that from the old Match Game, Jay. Yes, we've been using a clip from Match Game the whole time. But it's so short that CBS don't. But at any rate, the alleged bare-skinned burglar who staged a creepy campout in Chris Brown's house pled not guilty today to the 3 felonies carrying up to 7 years behind bars, which your face is probably still feeling the freeze of shock from hearing that yesterday. I'm so sorry about that, but at any rate, Amira Kochia Ayab, I think that's how you pronounce her name, appeared in court and was ordered to stay at least 100 yards away from the Grammy winner for 3 years. Her public defender said she didn't own any firearms as a judge set her bail at $220,000. A man identified in court as a relative declined to comment. Prosecutors said Ayab broke into Brown's home last Saturday and vandalized his property and pricey cars. Brown returned home Wednesday, discovered her inside, and called police, they said. He included a photo on his Instagram of Ayab apparently naked and wrapped in a white towel or bathrobe. Brown's bizarre encounter...
Hello!
Yeah, I know, right? Brown's bizarre encounter reportedly started when he found women's clothing scattered through the foyer of his suburban LA home and the words "I love you" spray painted on the kitchen. He said she also painted her name on his cars. The nudist convention. I stay as far away from those as I humanly possibly can, and that counts for your nude beach. Oh yeah. Anyway, Ayab is an aspiring singer who attends the University of Houston, and after this whole scenario, I think she's about to lose all of her tuition. She posted a message online several days ago stating that she was in Malibu for her home. Ayab, who wrote that she was from Tunisia and lives in LA, had told Pausch she was going to see Brown and then boarded a bus to California, a friend told TMZ. She's due back in court May 21st. And Joss Whedon's Avengers Age of Ultron from Disney and Marvel is dominating the North American box office for the second weekend in a row, with early estimates pointing to a weekend haul north of 90 million. The Reese Witherspoon and Sofia Vergara comedy Hot Pursuit appears headed to collect only around $4.5 million on Friday, as it eyes an opening weekend take of about $13 million. Hoping to cater to females over Mother's Day weekend, the movie began rolling out in North American theaters Thursday night, where it earned just $450,000. That's rather paltry. Meanwhile, Age of Ultron, which took in $191 million in North America during its opening weekend, is racing toward the $1 billion mark globally. Through Thursday, the tentpole had earned a staggering $753 million worldwide, already putting it ahead of every Marvel Cinematic Universe film, save for The Avengers, Iron Man 3, and Guardians of the Galaxy. And Friday, Age of Ultron is crossing the $500 million mark internationally, a feat only accomplished by Iron Man 3 and The Avengers. And Fletcher directed Witherspoon and Vergara, an MGM and New Line comedy, which is going out through Warner Brothers, MGM, and Witherspoon's company Pacific Standard, ran production on Hot Pursuit, starring Witherspoon as... who cares what she stars as? Oh, apparently it's a police officer. Yeah, well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to resist arrest on this one, officer.
I know.
And they spent $35 million on this one.
Well, I don't think it's a police officer. I've actually seen the trailer on this. I actually think she's a meter maid.
That's what she is. Well, they wrote police officer here in the Hollywood Reporter, so according to your research, this is wrong. I'm going to send him a note after this one, if I can find a way to send it.
You do that.
Yeah,
Corey Evans setting the Hollywood Reporter straight and giving us our entertainment report.
Yes.
Wow, what a week it's been, folks. What a bit of history we have seen here with the UK British elections here on SHR. We're glad we were able to bring you that bit of history here. And, of course, thankful for all of our staff for coming down last weekend for the 15th Annual Eagle Forum Conference. It's been amazing 2 weeks here for the SHR Media Network, and we thank all those involved in helping us with this. And ladies and gentlemen, on that note, that is going to be the Evan Miller Report for this Friday, May the 8th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller.
And I'm Corey Evan. Hey, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You'll be glad you did. I'll be back here tomorrow for the SHR Weekender at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific, where I pay tribute to this nation.
Okay, looks like we lost Corey Evan there, but do catch him on the SHR Weekend News, 3 Eastern, noon Pacific, right here on SHR Media. If you can't listen live, you can listen to it on podcast via Spreaker and Pundit Press Radio. Again, for all of us here at SHR Media, we wish you a great night, and we'll talk to you on Monday. Coming up next tonight, after a couple days without the weather forecast, you're wondering what the weather's going to be? Well, here's Helen Willits from the BBC Met Office. She has tonight's weather forecast for you. Helen, take it away.
Whilst for Ontario and Canada, we're having a heat wave at the moment, but you can see the explosive cloud here across parts of the plains, particularly Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma. We're going to see some more severe storms, and the tornado risk is with us. This is Anna, a storm which is going to give some choppy conditions out at sea and some lashings of rain for the coast of Carolinas. And then the Intermountain West could see some snowfall as well. So we have got lots of weather through the weekend going on. It looks like quite a stormy day for some. Temperatures, though, you can see there in Seattle getting into the low 20 Celsius, now 73 Fahrenheit, and enjoying some sunshine, along with the rest of Western Canada and the northwest of the USA. But as I say, come inland, heavier rainfall, mountain snow around Salt Lake City, at the higher elevations anyway, and no sign of much rain in California or indeed Nevada. We've got that warmth with us in Ontario, but some heavy showers stretching right the way down from the Great Lakes. This is Anna, as I mentioned. We'll keep an eye on that because she's giving stormy conditions and severe storms with the tornadic risk and hail and thunder, damaging hail and damaging winds. We'll keep fine weather towards the west into the latter part of the weekend, early next week. Temperatures just dropping away a little bit, but risk of some showers for Montreal, some fine weather for New York.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.